Why is it that so many children struggle with maths? Well, in this video, we're going to look at one reason that a lot of people can miss and what parents can do to help. Hi, I'm Scott, a qualified maths teacher from the UK, and I want to make the argument in this video that one of the reasons that children struggle so much with maths is actually nothing to do with numbers, but it's everything to do with reading comprehension. That advice might sound strange coming from a maths teacher in a video about teaching maths, but the educational research consistently shows that higher reading ability is linked with success in maths. For example, this study in the UK found that students with a higher reading ability achieve better GCSE results in every subject. That finding itself is not particularly surprising, but what is surprising is this: the relationship between reading ability and success was actually stronger for mathematics than it was for English literature. I often hear students come and say things like, I just don't understand what this question's asking me to do. And when students say that, I take them at complete face value because they've got a good point. A lot of the difficulty behind maths problems comes from interpreting the language and understanding the vocabulary of the question. One obvious example of this is a question like, list the first 5 multiples of 3. And oftentimes I've seen students who just aren't sure how to answer that question. Is that because they don't know their 3 times tables? No, it has absolutely nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with the fact that they don't understand what the word multiples means in that context. If instead the question said, list the first 5 numbers in the 3 times tables, there would be no problem at all. And so the problem isn't their number knowledge, it's their vocabulary knowledge. It's the language of the maths itself. This challenge of language also shows up in exams. For example, in the GCSE mathematics exam, oftentimes the maths questions are very word heavy and context heavy as well. And so worded maths questions are, at least in part, a reading exercise where students need to decode the text, extract that relevant information, and then turn that information into calculations that are ultimately going to get them the right answer. At this point in the video, we've established that reading comprehension is really important for success in maths. And so I just want to spend a little bit of time helping parents by giving them some practical advice that they can take away and implement when they're helping their child. The first is about what you can do in the moment when your child's struggling with a maths problem. When this happens, I personally just start by rephrasing and unpacking the question. It can be very, very tempting to just jump in and tell them, okay, this is what you need to do, and that's the calculation that's going to get you the right answer. And sometimes that's necessary if they're really stuck. But oftentimes I've found just unpacking that question, just giving it more meaning, can really point them in the right direction and get them started. And the problem is, if we tell them what to do right away, we're the ones who've done the hard thinking, not them. And it's the hard thinking where the learning happens. If rephrasing the question hasn't helped, the next thing I would try is asking them a question about the text. Sometimes asking a really good question can help to point them in the right direction. If at this point they're still stuck, that's when I would begin to show them how to do the question. That doesn't mean I need to show them everything about the question, but it does mean that I need to show them how to get started at the very least. From there, they can then take it on themselves and finish it. Now, I want to be clear, I'm not saying that we should never directly teach children how to do something and that we should just kind of leave them there to figure it all out for themselves. There are times when they're learning new content that we should teach them directly how to do something, and we should show them. The advice here applies for when they're doing a problem-solving question. That means they're already familiar with the content behind the problem, and it's the wording and the language of the problem that's holding them back. When it comes to reading comprehension, you want to be aiming for a consistent volume of thoughtful reading. And I really like that phrase because I think it summarizes 2 key main ideas. The first is that quantity matters. The more reading your child can do, the more likely it is that they're going to get better at reading comprehension. Even 1 hour a day is going to make a huge difference over time. And the second idea that that phrase sums up is that the quality of the reading matters. Reading should be thoughtful and challenging, not passive. And if I had to pick one piece of advice, one single piece of advice in this area, it would be this: get your child to read the great books. These are books that have stood the test of time, and they contain ideas that have really influenced history. The logic behind reading the great books is that it not only exposes your child to these great and influential ideas that have impacted history, but it also opens them up to new vocabulary and sentence structures. When choosing a book, we want to aim for one that they're going to understand about 80 to 90% of, and we don't want them to understand all of it because we want them to encounter new vocabulary, and we want to build their ability to handle complex sentence structures. C.S. Lewis argued for reading the great books of the past, and he said the following: every age has its own outlook. It is especially good at seeing certain truths and especially liable to make certain mistakes. We all, therefore, need the books that will correct the characteristic mistakes of our own period. For those who are interested in the idea of getting their child to read the Grit books, I've put a reading list in the description of this video. And the list is split by age and also ability, so that you can pick a book that's at the right level for your child. The second thing you want to do to improve your child's reading comprehension is to deliberately expand their vocabulary, because vocabulary growth has a huge impact on reading comprehension. There are a few strategies that work really well here. Firstly, I'd say, whenever you're reading with your child, or if they're reading on their own, you can encourage them to look up any words that they're not sure of. And what they can do from there is they can then put that word onto their vocabulary list. And over time, this vocabulary list will grow and they'll get lots of new words that they need to learn. The problem is we need a way for them to then learn those new words. And there's so many apps out there that are really going to be helpful in that area. One example is Anki. It's a spaced repetition app where your child can add the words to this list, and then over time the app's going to remind them and help them to remember the words. This video will have been my first ever YouTube video, and so I'd really appreciate if you could drop a like on the video and also subscribe to the channel. Doing both those things will help the channel to grow, and it'll help me to support more parents with educational advice. Thank you for watching.